Cool, awesome. Welcome to this week's Substrate Sync. Got a pretty packed agenda, so I think we'll get right on it. The first item is based on a discussion we've been having on artifact generation. It's actually an idea that comes from Niels, which is one of the things that we were thinking about when we're generating artifacts for like Python and Rust and all of these languages, that we want to package them as libraries. But inevitably, we think we're going to release one of these and we're going to screw it up, and we're going to need to release a patch version of like the artifact to like undo or fix a mistake. That doesn't work super well with the current version of Substrate, where we can have patch releases in the core spec. So something that Niels was thinking about was, what if we restrict the core spec to only ever do major and minor updates, and then we reserve patch updates for like library fixes in the actual artifacts that we're generating for downstream consumers? So this would be slightly inconvenient for the spec, as every change would have to be at least a minor change, but it would give us the flexibility to fix artifacts when we inevitably screw something up. I guess, yeah. Well, also this one is, oh, go ahead then.
I don't know if this is or isn't the right approach, but I'm wondering why, if it's been considered to just have totally separate versioning, like the packaging library has its own versioning setup, and we just make it really explicit as either it's part of the distributed zip file name or something, what version of Substrate it's actually targeting.
The scheme that we have now, I can get into that, is the idea that if we generate like Substrate protobuf for Python at version like 80.0, that corresponds to version 80.0 of the spec. The issue is when you start decoupling it, especially once we're thinking for Python alone, for example, we have Antler stuff for generating, extension stuff for generating, protobuf stuff for generating. And it's much easier to reason about if you say these artifacts have one-to-one correspondences with the specification versions. Because then you get to like, okay, we have Substrate Python pulling in Substrate protobuf version 1.2, which actually is version 2.7 of the spec, and is pulling in Substrate Antler, 2.0, which is version. You start to have to like have these conversations about what the version mappings are versus.
I see.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean that
sub-patches or whatever.
What was that, sorry, David?
Adding another patch level.
Then you start to have to deal with like which of the library ecosystems for does pip support like sub patches? I don't think so. And then it's like, does Java do it? Does Rust do it? Do all of these components do it? What I want to say is, what I want from right now is, I'll say it sounds like no one has any strong objections to doing something like this, so we can make an issue in actually, Weston,
sorry, not an objection. It's just like, what would a patch change to the spec even be?
I was thinking that a patch change to the spec could be literally something as simple as fixing a typo. Like there's no semantic meaning changed, or no definition of the spec changed, or something like refactoring the site, any changes to the site really at all that don't affect the spec. I could imagine things that we would want to do that shouldn't create a minor version bump.
Yeah, and if we wanted to, we could even hold off on like, okay, if we're just doing typo fixes or doc only fixes, then we won't make a release until we have an actual change. But it sounds like I think I'm going to have us move on. Like the thing I wanted to probe right now is, does anyone have any strong objections to this? If so, we could discuss it. But if not, I think we'll make a issue in the Substrate or even a PR to get rid of it, and we can have a discussion there about like, we won't use patch fixes or patch updates in the core spec, and we can do it there. Cool. Next issue is Caden. Do you want to give a brief spiel of what you've been looking at?
Yeah, sure. I think I'm pretty new. I don't think I've joined one of these before, but yeah, I'm Caden. I was looking into like the Data Fusion consumer specifically, and there's a hack in there, I think, with how they handle I8s, like regular signed integers. They essentially use like the type variation reference to specify unsigned versus signed. And yeah, I didn't think that was like the best use of it. So I looked at the spec a bit, and I did find that there's like a function behavior option you can set to specify like if the variation type is can have like the same behavior or not for the same functions. But I'm not sure if that's like actually the best way to go. And thankfully there was like a very early discussion about this in Substrate that shows that like we were already thinking about this. And there was like a very early decision, I think, to just kind of reference like very popular query systems to determine the types. But I'm almost wondering now if like we think like an alternate approach could be useful to avoid problems like this to represent unsigned. Like I can share my screen. It's
Yeah, and I think well, Caden does that. Like the historical issue that he found from it was actually Jack's commenting as well that the reason we didn't add unsigned in 2021, which is something about when that was I think only Arrow had it, or one of the arguments was that it only exists in Arrow. And I think Caden did a good job of looking at other parts of the ecosystem that do use unsigned types. A bunch of them which actually are like Iceberg and Parquet, and a bunch of like the data types themselves actually have them. And we actually have like an Iceberg consumer in Substrate already, which kind of led to the question of like, okay, we support Iceberg, but not all the types that Iceberg supports. And I think what we're trying to go from here is we probably should have some kind of first-class story about how to handle unsigned stuff or unsigned numeric types in the spec. It's been popping up in the way the data fusion does it is pretty hacky.
yeah, it's still here.
And the meta thing that we're doing is we're trying to figure out how to have nice mappings from Substrate to Arrow to make data fusion integration nicer. Weston.
Yeah, so I put a link in the chat. I made an attempt at this at one point in the past and got it merged into Arrow, which means at least one other person thought it was okay. It's not using type variations, so it talks about how to encode all of the various arrow types. I only got to the non-parameterized types, so it doesn't do the parameterized arrow types. So there's still more work to do, like and some of them I think are just, they're not ever going to be substrate types. So like dictionary or run-in encoding are more properly variations. Arrow's type system is not very cleanly logical types only.
The other thing that data fusion also treats like dictionary encodings as a type. Like they actually have a type variation on our map type, which is quite hacky in a lot of ways, and that's another thing that we're thinking about getting to.
Well, isn't dictionary like the canonical type variation? Just it wouldn't be a type variation of map, it would just be like dictionary of int is, or a dictionary of string is type variation of string, right?
A dictionary of string.
That's a canonical, very exact purpose, right? Like, yeah, dictionary encoding, run length encoded, like columnar versus row wise. Those are all type variations.
So what I say is, that makes sense. The caveat I'm saying is that data fusion has a map type with a type variation is dictionary encoding. It's not the string with a type variation for dictionary encoding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a
wait, but it is a string.
No. Well,
what is the logical type in data fusion?
What's the logical type in data fusion?
For the thing you were just talking about. Like, what is the actually let's stay off of that. We're kind of getting sidetracked.
We will come back to that, because that's also a thing that we want to figure out a good story for. But taking a step back, so Weston, you added like an extension types to YAML to handle things in Arrow that weren't in Substrate. So that's potentially a way to approach this, is build on that and have data fusion use that. But
I think let's start with I would kind of do this hierarchical. Like the hierarchy is type variation the right way to handle this? No. Like type variation is should not change the logical meaning of the type, right? So the range of possible values should not change because you used type variation.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Should we add unsigned types to the first class citizen? I feel like that's question number 2.
Yeah.
Hey, we're using multiple systems that all have this type. Do we want to use an extension type or a first class type? Like,
Yeah, I think that's the question is like, is a user-defined type enough, or is this a first-class entity? And I think there's enough other things that have this type that I suspect that they're going to run into similar things where what we're trying to do is look at how people are using the type system and finding places where they've hacked around limitations, and this was one of them. And actually,
So let's just like, hey, SMC, until Victor puts out a vote that it should be renamed PMC.
that's already
people on this
went through, by
call.
the way. That's done. We're the PMC now.
Has it been done, Victor?
Yeah.
All right. Just don't miss that. All right. PMC members on this call, how many do thumbs up or thumbs down? I'm just gonna take a straw poll here. Thumbs up or thumbs down to add unsigned types as a first class type in the spec?
There's like no in between. Okay. Do this.
I guess, yeah, there's a question about how we should do it. And
Like,
I feel like David didn't vote at all. Did he not vote?
just move on to the whatever the next phase. The one thing is we had a similar discussion because like we had a discussion with the type variation versus actual proper type or UDT or proper type from our internal use case. So and then yes, I think the consensus was clearly type variation shouldn't change like logical meaning as Jack said. So that's good. And then there's the second thing. So there was a discussion around like, oh yeah, I mean, we are trying to adding this, I need to revive the PR, but we are adding this SQL Server specific, like, I mean, SQL Server is main consumer, like variations, like the varying behavior of the grouping operator, let's say. And there was a discussion like, I mean, we can go either like standard extensions or not. And then there was one of Jack's comments was like, I mean, SQL Server is a popular database, so happy to adopt it. That's Jack's opinion. So I look, what is the rule? So basically, okay, not every system is having this unsigned uint64 type. So what is the bar? What is the bar to?
Well, I think I think that we should like the original bar doesn't need to be the bar today, and probably shouldn't be, right? So when Substrate started, there were no people inside versus outside, right? It was like it wasn't a community yet, and so there were just people, right? And so everybody was like, well, it should include all my types. That was kind of the pattern.
I see.
And so you're just like, okay, well, I can't have 700 types that are all slightly different of each other, or this is never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think I was the one that put forward the idea that a certain number of systems should have a type for it to be included. And that was kind of the rule and the bar that we had back then.
Okay.
And I think that was useful at the time. I would question whether that is the right way to look at it. Like, I feel like now we have a PMC that is invested in the project, is thinking about all the different dynamics. And so I kind of feel like the PMC should discuss it. And if the PMC wants to add a type. And it could be that it's one system, but it's a really, really important system. Like, I don't think that we need to use that old bar now.
Okay.
Like, that isn't like I don't feel like that's fundamental to the project. That was just a thing that we used at the time. Now we can decide to use it still now. But I don't think that anybody should feel obligated to that old pattern.
Sounds good. I just want to clarify that thing.
Yeah. I mean, like that's, I guess that's slightly a change from how we've operated, but like, it was never my intention in originally suggesting that always be the rule.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
No, that makes sense. And I think I think one of the things I wanted to get from this discussion was like, okay, type variations aren't the right way to do this. Okay, we're all on board for that. It seems like it's worthwhile to have a way to represent them based on the fact that they keep popping up, and not just Arrow, but like ClickHouse and DuckDB have them, Iceberg tables use them. Like, it's popping up as part of the ecosystem. And then the question is guess Weston, you were like, is it a bad idea to add them to the core types? No. Is it a good idea? Meh. And there might be a separate discussion about. We had a discussion a while back about adding like type classes. So like instead of having like individual like I8, I32, I64, I whatever and such, having like numeric type identifier. And that might be time to revisit that. But there are people with hands up. Ben.
I was just going to say, I'm not particular either way, but from my perspective, as far as I can tell, there's no difference in what plans can or can't be represented by having an unsigned integer as part of the official type system versus it being a first class extension type that's part of the core extension set. And so that's another halfway option to just put it in there. And now all of the systems, will have that extension available because it's part of the YAML files that are distributed. But we don't have to call it first class. It's like a second class type.
Class 1A.
Class 1A, yeah.
International business class.
Yeah. And then David as well.
So the types, it would be nice to be able to represent them, but types is one thing. Functions comes next, right?
Yeah.
And so now you start, and then a lot of things have any support, and so they'll sort of work. But now you need mixed type int and unsigned int functions, and then to throw snow under the fire, there's always things like snowflake floats versus other people's floats, or actually not floats. Their numeric class. I forget what their numeric class is. But they behave differently than everybody else. So
It's not definitely.
Yeah.
I would say that like I think that Ben's point is really a good one. And so maybe we have a pattern of add a moderate bar to adding types to the core extension set, and then if we like them there for a while, we move them into. I mean, I don't even know why it matters. I actually feel like functions is better. In some ways, I feel like functions is a better implementation because there isn't like first class A and first class B, right? Like there isn't like a type in Substrate that's in the protobuf versus a type that like types. So we have this protobuf versus YAML. In functions, we just got YAML, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't like these two different classes of things that are both inside of the Substrate core repo, whereas types there are. But yeah, I think that it's a clear enough problem, and we don't have anybody else. I think that the thing that we wanted to have happen that I don't see happening, or at least I wanted to have happen, was there to be canonical sets of extension types not in the Substrate repo. Right? There's nothing stopping Project X from defining a set of extension types and Project Y and Z using those same extension types. Right? That was kind of how it was envisioned. This is that Substrate wouldn't be the place where all the types needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It was trying to be like, if you think about package management, like there's like the node pattern versus the Go pattern, right? In Go, everything's kind of, decentralized, whereas in Node, it's pretty much centralized. And so we were trying to go after, I was trying to go after that with the extension pattern is that it would be decentralized. That's not happening right now, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd be like, well, fine, let's just allow it to be centralized for now. And if people want to decentralize in the future, they can. We're not trying to stop it, but adding classes of functions that are for this system versus that system, and types for this system versus that system, and just labeling them as such in the core repo seems fine to me.
That's a good idea as well. We can distinguish between like canonical like type extensions roughly, and then like these are little, and whatever David you were thinking about for Snowflake, and being like, you know what, here's like Snowflake's weird extension for their weird math that they do as a separate thing. And I think to your point, Jax, I think we want to get to a world where like systems can encode, like I have a weird type, here's my extension file for it. It's just when you start to get into the types, I think, that are actually shared across the ecosystem, where it's like, to go back to Weston's thing, it's like, okay, we have the canonical arrow types in, that extension types like YAML potentially. But those types also we want to use those in other places that aren't arrow necessarily. And that's kind of where it gets like, and when you start seeing it in multiple places, maybe that's when it's like a canonical core substrate type versus like one-off type.
So that brings up the interesting concept, like standard extension. This sounds weird, but yeah. So basically, extensions that are part of Substrate repo that everyone actually can see. So there can be a collection of extensions with types and related functions, all these functions, and maybe we can sit it there for a while, and then okay, like it looks like this is stable, and everyone is using it. Then we can actually promote it to, to core. That's one approach. So
like to me, it's pretty standard, right? First class plugins versus third class plugins. Like, that's what DuckDB has, right?
Yeah.
And things can move between one and the other depending on how popular they are.
Right. Yeah. So I like the idea. Yeah. So.
Okay. I'm trying to think of like if I have a lot of good ideas for extensions generally. So are we thinking that we should treat unsigned integers as a canonical extension to begin with, or as a core type? And I feel like the bigger question actually, David, is like handling all of the functions we would have to add. So basically, you have to have variants for all of the unsigned integers for all of the arithmetic functions, probably.
Yes.
Which was like, I think this actually has come up before. I think that was the sticking point, is we have to like not quite double the number of functions in a bunch of places, but close.
My loosely held thought would be is that let's just use like first class extension types. I'm gonna start using first class and third class.
Yeah.
Where first class is in the substrate repo and third class is somewhere else. My loosely held thought would be is let's start with first class extension type. And we can build the functions there. I think there's a question in my head, which is that like maybe we just stop adding substrate types. Like what is the bar to add a substrate type? Like, why would you do it? Why not just add an extension type? We don't have to generate a bunch of protobuf, whatever. I think that the one argument would be is that like if you're handwriting a bunch of code against things, it can be nicer to work against the substrate fully compiled types than the user-defined types. Yeah.
And just
hopefully nobody's hand coding anything anymore. So.
Perfect.
And just slightly more easy representation of literals in plants. Slightly more easy, but I would call that like a not even worth thinking about issue.
There's a fun thought there, which we're not going to continue during this meeting, but like, no, yeah, what if you're right? What if everything became a first class extension? There were no core types. Everything was just extensions all the way down. That could be its own 15-minute thing, or more than that. I think let's start with the first class extension for unsigned.
Nobody's going to do that work. Like, it doesn't matter. Like if we sure purely that might make sense, but like nobody's going to do that. Come on. Like adding more versus not, that's something that we have influence over. But like taking the existing ones and ripping them out, I can't imagine doing that.
It could potentially make some of the handling stuff easier, but that's who's going to be motivated? That's a great question. Anyways, Ben, there's some more really easy questions for us to deal with in this meeting. You want to go talk about type equality and type assignment confusion with regards to handling?
Okay. Yeah, I'm asking a question which is a leading question set up for my next question. But the first question is, when do we consider two types equal? And in particular, do we consider two types equal when they have differing nullability? I think the answer. Okay. It depends on the context. Go ahead.
In the context of a function binding, the function can define different equivalence rules. right? If the function says null if null or whatever the heck the property is, then that means it'll accept either null or non-null arguments together. And so the binding is the equality of type with and without nullability, or nullable and not nullable are the same.
You're talking about a case where we say a function accepts an int and an int, let's say, and it returns whatever. And
Which
we
is the
have
common case.
Which is the common case. And we basically say we are allowing nullable arguments in this particular case, but it might influence the output of the return type, the type of the return type.
Right? It does, and there's rules about it.
So, okay. I am comfortable with that answer, but then the next question is, suppose you have a function which has that behavior. Is it mirror? Mirror the one where you can accept some mix of nullable and non-nullable
Yes.
arguments,
Like
and it makes.
the output nullability depends solely on the input nullability.
Okay, so I guess let me be specific. The function coalesce, in theory, is supposed to accept arguments of only one type, but in a variadic way. So let's say we're passing an int to coalesce. Can coalesce accept a mix of null and non-null ints?
It depends on what the declaration is, if it's discrete or mirror or whatever the options are.
It's
Well-
mirror right now.
It's mirror.
Mm.
So
That's also wrong, but
But-
that's a different question.
the confusing thing here is that we're combining two sort of confusing things, which is we're assigning different types to the same any one if we define different type to mean differing nullability, but we seem to allow it because of mirroring behavior. So yeah, is that a valid invocation of coalesce with an int and a nullable int?
I think historically, yes.
Yeah, I mean, like that's why I was saying you can't look at the type independent of the context. Like
Sure.
like it's like, hey, like if you think about like it's like the function definition itself is a function, if you will, and the arguments of the function definition include the argument that you give for the any one or whatever it is, and the argument for whether or not it's mirror or discrete, and the combination of those things defines the type binding behavior.
And
So I would say that is valid.
I am okay with that interpretation, but I feel like then the doc should spell it out somewhere, because you can construct a different evil case, which is, imagine we had like coalesce where the first argument was a list of ints and the second one was a list of nullable ints, right? Like those two things we would not consider the same type.
this came up for us because the primitive type case is kind of what mirror, we think we mostly understand what it's supposed to mean, even if it's not as clearly written in the spec. When you start to get the composite types, it's like, oh wait, can the outer nullabilities differ, but do the inner nullabilities need to match?
Yes, because the function behavior is only at the argument level. Anything inside of the argument is what I would call like sort of like standard equality rules.
Okay.
Like
This
it's kind of like it's a decoration on the outside of the type. It's only on the outside of the type.
So this one that I just sent in the chat is an example of a place where we would require anyone's to match exactly, including nullability. Like you could not call after
I don't see the chat
Yeah,
message.
Ben, where did you send that to?
in the Substrate sync G meet. Oh, my message wasn't
Oh.
delivered. Okay, let's see if it works this time. I just know it is not pleasant to have these signatures explained verbally, but this might be what has to happen if this message doesn't send. But okay, I'll try the verbal.
If you send it to me, I can maybe try and I don't know if you have like admin powers.
I
or
don't know, something weird is happening. It's not that complicated. You have a function which accepts two arguments, and both of them have type list any one. So in this case, you could imagine wanting to make an invocation of the function that's like list of int, list of nullable int or something. In that case, we would disallow it because we are assigning two different types technically to the anyone. But if we go back to the coalesce case, we allow coalesce of anyone where it's int and nullable int, because the outermost parameter is a special case in the sense of nullability handling for mirror. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually would call out something that I think maybe we don't explicitly say. But I believe it should be, if the function defines the nullability behavior, then you should not define it on the types that are provided. Like, you shouldn't ever
Yes.
say coalesce is using any question mark or any one question mark.
Yeah.
Because
If it's mirror.
if it's mirror. Yeah.
I agree. So, okay. I think that everything that's being said that is consistent with the things that are in the spec, but some of it is implicit, so it might just be good to add it. I am saying this because I think I may have introduced a bug in Substrate Go as a consequence of my own misunderstanding of this, where I assumed that we could not assign different types to anyone.
I think
when the
there's
nullability
room
set.
for a page on type equality checking where you have a bunch of examples about the weird edge cases that we weren't sure about, and I think as we've been doing more integrate, especially with composite types that are nested, start to get into like weird things about like where equality means what in what context, and there's enough room for interpretation that we've run into differences between the libraries, which is a problem. But
So I think it's reasonable then to say that the default behavior is when you're comparing types for equality, nullability matters, but there are special carve-outs for cases where it doesn't matter, and the special carve-out is function mirror, and maybe any other ones that come up as we investigate. But function mirror, the outermost nullability.
I haven't. Yes, I think that's right. I have a piece of advice to people having worked on this. I don't know whether or not Mitchell will agree with me or Weston will agree with me, but my advice is this: is there are two places where nullability matter. One is in execution, where you can avoid a bunch of operations because things are not null. And the second one is in certain query optimization. Okay, there's a couple of them, right, where you can simplify a query if you know something is not nullable. Outside of that, everybody should always use nullable. Like, that's an advice. And in fact, actually, the way that I did this, this is me on a soapbox for a minute, but the way that we've done what I found with most systems is most people mark nullable on things in case they might be nullable, when 99% of the time the data is not nullable. And so at an execution level, you really don't even want to use nullability as, I mean, sure, if it's non-nullable, then you can use that as a short path to efficiency. But in the case that people marked it nullable, odds are most of the time it's non-null anyway. And so at a batch level of records, you still look at whether or not there's any null records. And if there aren't, you do the fast path anyway. So to me, my advice to anybody who's building a system or working on a system is just treat everything as nullable, except in the one or two little locations, but don't treat it as a type knowledge system level thing. Because otherwise you get into all of these things that people are fighting. Like, you're like, well, fuck, I want to concatenate a list of int non-nullable and nullable ints. What the fuck does that mean? Like, can I do that? Does the output, should I check the output to see whether or not there's any not null values in that int list? And if so, then I have to set a different type output. Like, there's a lot of really not helpful to user things. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox now.
Yeah, just like a bit of, in the function context, an implicit upcast from non-nullability to nullability should be fine when you're trying to understand like what the user wants to do. You just assume that is all what they wanted to do. I think Pyro doesn't actually validate nullability when you make arrays or batches. So we just, I guess this is somewhat tangential, but yeah, we never trust the user if they say their data is nullable or non-nullable.
So
User is the enemy. Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. I mean, when it comes to the question here, like, I don't know how much time we should spend.
I'm put like a block of like 3 more minutes for this. I want to get to Neil's some agenda items as well.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess Ben, we'll make a PR with a bunch of examples and of screwed up things that you can encode and be like, how should this be interpreted? And then everyone will be like, this is weird, and we'll figure it out there.
I have more to say if we end up having extra time at the end, but yeah, I will rest my case for now.
It's good that these are getting big enough that now we never have time at the end because people have a lot of things going on. Speaking of which, Niels, there's some protobufs that we should remove potentially.
Yeah, so I just wanted to draw some attention to some stuff I noticed. So there's one pull request that proposes to remove a couple of proto files that don't seem to be used. It already has 2 approvals from PMC members, but yeah, it would be great if you can take a look and just confirm that you agree with my assessment. The capabilities for the Substrait dialect one is related, I would say, because I noticed this today. We have a capabilities proto, which also has section documentation, and it reminded me a lot of the Substrait dialect. So I was wondering if, since we have the Substrait dialect now, whether we still need capabilities.
Let's go point by point, otherwise we'll.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. I think for the removal of the unused protos, I think that was honestly, I was waiting for Jax to weigh in on that because I don't know what they were for. I don't think they're used anymore, so I'm actually probably in agreement. But I think you have the historical context to know if what they're used for.
Yeah, it allows you to communicate extensions in structured form in protobuf. I don't think that they're being used by any public code. Now, the flip side of that is, like, did Victor just call me old?
No, I think you were just here at the start. I don't know.
That's how I interpret historical context.
Yeah, I think that they will get rehydrated at some point. I actually think that it's an important thing, but if everyone wants to delete them, I'm fine with that. It's called GitHub. It's got a Git repo with history. But yeah, structurally, it's actually very, yeah. Anyway, I have found them quite useful, but if I'm the only one that does, that's and I'm not working on this stuff right now, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a general question. I think there are a couple of places, both in the documentation as well as in the proto definitions, where we kind of have work in progress artifacts. And on a path to 1.0, how clean do we want to have the documentation and the repo be? And what do we do with this work in progress artifacts? I can understand that they will still be useful in the future, but if we have them in the main branch, I mean, I only became truly aware about them because there was this question in an issue, and I was like, oh, what is the data structure? I've never seen it because I never used it. And then realized, oh, that seems to be a leftover. Yeah, so,
yeah. Actually, I think to Jack's point, we could rehydrate them. And I think they are work in progress. No one right now has been pushing them to be like complete. And I think that removing them, they don't spark joy, we can remove them. And then the best pattern will be we remove them. Someone will come yell at us about them and be like, hey, you seem to care about this. Congratulations, you can now own this.
Yeah, I'll put my historical context to bear. Anecdotally, there's been at least 2 or 3 instances I can think of where people have thought that these were real and part of the spec and being actively used and got confused trying to figure out where they plugged in and went down a little bit of rabbit hole chasing this. So.
Cool. Then yeah, I'll vote on that PR and we can merge them later. And then Neil, your next point was about updating the PMC.
I'm going to ask one question there.
Yes, yes.
Do we have a page that talks about these things conceptually?
For
not these specific files, but the different, like one of the things that becomes challenging in working with the system to me, or at least was early on, and I don't remember the exact names. I think that we use slightly different names in the validator, like when we're looking at function validation. But depending on the context you're in, you can use a different level of parameterization. Right, there's like fully materialized types, and if my recollection is that there's two levels of semi-materialized types. One for function inputs and one for function outputs, I think. Right, where function outputs it can be an expression, function expression, or like a whatever output type derivation, whatever. And so the one thing I'll put out there is that it might be useful if we don't have a place already to talk about the three different levels of parameterization, which is like fully materialized, like semi-materialized, like because one's reference based, one is not. Right? Like in the arguments of a function, you can use parameters, but those parameters can't reference, other than by name, other parameters. You can't have expressions. Whereas in the output type derivation, you can have expressions and point to input types.
To the best of my knowledge, we don't have that. I do think that would be useful. It sounds like you have a lot of strong opinions about this and know what you're talking about with regards to this.
Not happening, Victor. Not happening. I think Ben's the expert on this these days. So,
This exact question of specifying this is the exact thing I'm working on in the Substrate RS library right now, but I have just assumed this knowledge implicitly. I can look into upstreaming something at some point in the future.
yeah, I mean, we've gone through it a couple of times, like in different places, and like each of the libraries, you kind of have to figure out that these things have to be modeled differently, because otherwise you put the wrong kind of type expression, whatever you want to call it, in a location, right? And so it might be useful to actually formalize those names. I think I used a specific set of names in these files. Anyway, we can move on. It's just
yeah, I will let it go. But I think to solve this issue, there's another issue that I'd open that will need to be solved, which is this distinction between anyone versus the T's and the S's and all of these different types. Maybe if we have time at the end, we can discuss that one. I was going to leave it for another session.
I think that might be another session. We'll move on to the next item just to keep it going. Niels, I guess you have a thing about the update PMC and committer associations. I think it's just potentially out of date is what you're going.
Yes, I mean, it inevitably always becomes out of date. But yeah, I just wanted to ask if people have an opinion on whether we should try to keep it up to date. I have a PR more or less ready to update it. I stalked some people on LinkedIn and GitHub and would have some updates. The only question I had was if I should provide evidence of what the source is, and then I would include like LinkedIn URLs and GitHub profile links, if anyone would have a concern about that. But I would have was trying to see whether this could be updated. It often might not be important whether this is up to date or not for big corporations like us. When we want to understand who is participating on a project, this is something sometimes insightful to just know what the associations are.
Yeah, even just looking through it, I'm like, I guess yeah, Voltron doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly, that is like an obvious candidate.
It's important for us. Like
it was for sale
in the governance document. Yeah, it's still for sale. But we state in the governance document that we aren't blind to organizational membership. So I think it is a PMC responsibility to correct that if we notice it is wrong. It would be nice, yeah, in a PR correcting that to have like why you think that is, and of course ping the person, respect them if they come in and say, oh no, actually this is wrong, I work blah blah blah, that's fine. But I don't think anyone should be upset if you say, I don't think you work at X anymore, I think you work at Y. And like I think we do have a responsibility to correct that.
Okay.
For not going through the evidence. Oh, sorry, Andrew, you hit your hand up.
Yeah, vaguely related to that. There's there's a process for electing new committers. Is there a process for retiring inactive committers? Because that list grows, and I think it can be misleading. If you think that there are committers on a project, but they're not really there anymore.
Do we actually want to clean up?
I don't like it, from a project standpoint. What is the downside to having an apparent larger group of people working on it than are actually working? It seems like from a project standpoint, it's better.
I've had a situation where I've tried to get the attention of what I thought was an active committer to get a review or feedback, and I can leave private messages in Slack and they never respond, presumably because they've completely moved on. And so for example, the Linux Foundation, they have a file, or the one I've worked on anyway, on Hyperledger. They have a file in the root of each repo, maintainers.md, and it has two lists. It has the current committers, and then it has a list of retired committers, so that and any committer that's just obviously not active for say the last 3 months will get the opportunity to become active, and if they really don't, then they get moved down into the retired list. So for the purposes of their resume, they can always point to that list and show that they were active, but they're no longer committers on that project. And it might motivate the PMC to think, well, actually, this particular Substrate Java, I mean, that's not the case for Substrate Java, but there might be other projects that really don't have anyone looking after that.
No, that makes sense. I guess Ben?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion either way. All I wanted to just say was the fact that there's a lot of separation between who contributes to different repositories. So in my experience, there will be committers who only contribute to one repository and don't touch any of the other ones. So you would have to keep that in mind if you were actually managing something like a contributing.md across all of the repositories, and who gets retired and who doesn't.
Jux?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty different perspective than Andrew on this one, which is I like the Apache way is that you can go emeritus if you want to, but that's the only way that it happens. That it isn't something where everybody else decides you're emeritus before you want to be. And so, I think I'd say 2 parts, which is like, to me, like making someone have to prove that they like let me use a concrete example, right? Like Wes and me, creating Apache Arrow, right? Like, I mean, I haven't done any contributions to Apache Arrow in years, right? It would bother me if they moved me to emeritus. And so, or put me in a different category as like, well, yeah, he was around at one point, but now he's not. Because I kind of feel like I still have, like, it's my baby. Like I still have a huge amount of ownership over it, even though I'm not active in it. And I actually think that probably there are a lot of places where if someone wanted to have a conversation with me and I had the time, I could get pretty helpful. So I think that's kind of reflect about like how I would feel about that. And that's kind of my first thought. My second thought is that I think that ignoring the feeling for individuals, the actual people on the list, I think that in general, I think the good of having what appears to be a vibrant community, and there are different ways that people judge vibrant community. Like some people look at stars, some people look at how many commits in the last 10 days. Some people look at the list of companies that have been involved at one point or another. And so I think the good of having people there that were involved at one point, but maybe aren't as much so now, outweighs the bad. Now, that being said, I do feel somewhat uncomfortable about assigning people their relationships. So I don't know how I feel about Niels's proposal to change people. Like, I kind of feel like people should probably do that themselves, right? Like, it's basically creating, even though if it's on LinkedIn, it's public. kind of, but actually LinkedIn actually makes you sign up, so it's semi-public, I guess I would say. But yeah, I'm okay with it. I don't feel I'm like a plus 0.2, let's say, on changing people and updating where they're at. I'd be more inclined to just ping the people and say, hey, like if the people said yes, like that's the thing is I'm like if someone says yes, I kind of feel like that, which is like people have to say yes in order for you to change their affiliation, as opposed to yeah. So if you propose a patch and the people say yeah, that looks good, then awesome. But changing someone's affiliation publicly without them approving of it feels.
And I imagine as well thinking about it from I think a number of people who worked at Voltron did Substrate stuff only as part of that work. So changing it to the current affiliation would be an accurate statement of the work that they were doing at that point in time. I think it makes sense to Niels to pursue anyone who's still actively contributing. Be like, are you still involved? And actually, to Andrew's point as well, I think I know one of the pain points that you've talked about. Like I also feel, which is, we're making changes to actually Structured Python right now, where Niels is looking at it as his Tornik, and it's like, a bunch of people have done things in the past on this repo. We're doing some pretty major changes. I've tried to let them know that we're doing it, but I'm not going to wait forever to get their feedback. And I don't know if that's a similar pattern that you've been having, where you're trying to reach out to people to be like, we're changing some stuff that you wrote like 2.5 years ago. Do you still care? And I think it's good to make an effort to reach out to them, but also if you don't hear back from them in like, a couple of days or a week, I think you're free to be like, as a committee yourself, working towards the project, say, I did my effort to try and talk to these people, and we're still moving forward, because you're also getting approvals from other people who are also committers. I don't know if that's a specific case that you've been dealing with, but I feel like I've also had that of like, this person's not active. They wrote the origins of this file, and I'm going to break their stuff maybe, but I don't know if they care anymore.
Yeah. The other thing that I think, to Andrew's comment, that I would say is that it would be helpful. Maybe there's just a service that you can go and do this and stick it on the GitHub README or whatever. But like, hey, this is how I do it. Like I go to the repo, I look at the committer graphs, and then see the people who have interacted recently. And those are the people to talk to. And so maybe there's a better way to synthesize that. I don't think this page is that though. Like I feel like this page is more about like sort of it's like the certificate you put on your wall.
Yeah, we do have some other items on the agenda, but I don't think we're going to have full time to discuss them. So maybe as a preview for the next one, Niels, your first point about capabilities for the Substrate dialect. I'm like,
yeah, so
capabilities, because that was kind of like, we haven't sold a capability exchange format, which, so that's my knowledge, no one uses. So maybe that one should also go the way of the dodo, but I don't think we need to decide that in the next few minutes.
yeah, I just wanted to raise the awareness that this is something we should discuss, and I can create a PR or an issue and we can discuss it there if there are strong opinions to keep it or not.
Yeah, and the thing to learn here is that apparently Victor goes in order, so you better get your agendas early or just insert them above something.
I do keep track of what's no.
Well, what I was going to suggest is that maybe we hit one item per person, as opposed to doing them in like, okay, we're going to do, I guess we kind of hit one, but like until Niels, then like that means Dave didn't get to say anything. So figuring out some way to shuffle a little bit so that everybody, like if we've got 5 people who want to talk, we give them each 10 minutes or whatever.
That makes sense. Actually, we can.
I could do my 2 points really quickly.
Yeah.
It's like Ben Weston. I'm done.
Ben,
The
go look at the
comments,
first item. Weston, go look at the second one.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. And I'll leave coalesce for availability handling for next time. No.
Holy
No,
crap.
I think we can look at some kind of randomization scheme.
That second one is David's 44,000 line patch.
To be
Right,
fair,
yeah,
I just
it's-
volunteer to look at it.
Wait, which one was for me? Was that one for me?
No.
Generate
I think it's the other one.
rel. Generate rel. That's the one you reviewed.
So your question was, do I have any more comments?
Yes.
Go review it again.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or,
now just
is it ready for other people to look at?
I will happily keep reviewing it, but yeah, my vote my vote doesn't mean anything in the end. So
And
It
realizing how
always
much
does.
I will summarize for
What-
the end.
Yeah,
We'll make
whether
it-
you have a formal credential or not, your vote matters.
thank you, John.
Actually, yes, I agree. That's actually-
I'm not joking about that.
No.
If someone comes in and says, I think this release shouldn't go out or this patch shouldn't come in, -1 on it, I don't care what credentials they have. I want to know what they're saying.
Sure, yeah.
Youngshot used to do that all the time when he was a committer and had a PMC, and it's like, no, like he brought a lot of really valuable insight into the conversation, which is why it's a PMC now. But I read what he wrote. I don't ignore committer feedback on PMC things.
I never even
I mean, I
think
try and
about it.
record PPR, so
Anyways, I'll do. It's that time. We'll do a brief summary. I'll make a PR into the upstream to talk about restricting patch usage for subject directive for artifacts. Kaden, we can look at adding an extension for unsigned integers as a canonical first class extension. Ben, you're going to write some examples up about all the weird type equality stuff that you can come up with when you start looking at composite types. We'll remove the protobufs. Niels, you can reach out to people to make the PMC stuff up to date. I've probably forgotten something, but yeah, we're getting a lot done. Lots happening.
it's
Welcome to
recorded,
2020.
we can all
Welcome to
play it back
2023.
if you found anything.
Year of Substrate.
Well, welcome to the new people who haven't been on the call before.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See everyone.
Bye.
Bye.